something other than personal use, or if you're hoping to ask questions for an interview, I just ask that you please use this link that I'm going to type in the chat box to request an interview. You can also contact our outreach coordinator. Her name is Elena Hunikins. And just as a reminder, please don't use photos or names of participants from the session today. So let me cut and paste. I actually have 3 different links. So one is for the outreach coordinator, one is to request an interview, and the third is a Qualtrics survey. And so if you guys want to go ahead and copy and paste that so you have it when the presentation ends, this just allows you to give us feedback about our presentation today. So I will go ahead and do a share screen. All right. So again, my name is Jenna Strathausen. I'm a doctoral intern here at Counseling and Psychological Services. I'm going to be talking about unhealthy versus healthy relationship communication. I find that these presentations are more engaging the more interactive they are. So feel free to shout out answers, to use the chat box, to just kind of engage with the information in however is most comfortable. So there are many different kinds of relationships, romantic, sexual, platonic, familial, professional, the list goes on. Each of these categories can look very different depending on the agreements made between the individuals involved within them. That said, many people start relationships with assumptions about what this type of relationship should look like. A common example is many people assume that romantic relationships should be monogamous, when in fact there are long-lasting and happy polyamorous relationships that are consensual. So this is just sort of to emphasize the importance of having conversations about what are your expectations and assumptions about your relationship. Um, so just to put it out there to you all, what are some assumptions you've made when entering into a new relationship that maybe ended up being inaccurate or bit you in the ass? And this could be of any of the categories that we mentioned. I actually don't have access to the screen, to the chat box when I'm sharing screen.
I'm happy to read the chat answers out loud if anyone ends up typing in, if you feel more comfortable that way.
Okay. Yeah, so any ideas? What are some assumptions that maybe you've made or maybe others in your life have made about a new relationship? I know that one thing that comes to mind could be, I mean, outside of the monogamy example, is maybe an assumption that your instructor will share their slides, when in fact not all instructors do this. Maybe an assumption is that your parents will pay for college, when that's not the case for everyone, or maybe it's conditional. So while every relationship is different, there are some universal aspects of healthy relationships. The first being equality. Relationships with friends, family, partners should be based on equal status. Second being respect. People should be treated with dignity. People are unique individuals with the right to be treated with respect and kindness. Communication is really important, both in communicating yourself and the expectation of open communication. And this could also include communicating disagreements if it's done in a constructive way. Trust. Trust is very foundational in relationships. So also ensuring that words match actions. Responsibility and accountability. So being responsible for your actions, being accountable to mistakes. Support. So being supportive and encouraging of people in your life. Honesty represents the flip side of trust. So ability to trust others also includes being honest yourself. Boundaries. Boundaries are can be physical in nature. They can be emotional in nature. It's important to know what your boundaries are and to respect the boundaries of others in your life. That includes non threatening behavior. So, no relationship should be aggressive or violent. Yes means yes. So, this is a nice chart that kind of goes through the different stages of consent. So, informed consent. You and your partner should both know about all the risks involved. That might include in a romantic relationship, whether either of you have any STIs. That should include activities that you plan to engage in, whether it's sex or otherwise. Enthusiastic consent. You and your partner should both want to participate. If either of you is feeling less than excited about it, then stop and reevaluate. Continuous consent. This is a big one. So, consent isn't a catch all process, it's an ongoing process. So, consenting to one act like kissing doesn't imply consent to another, like oral sex. You and your partner need to check in throughout your experience. Consent with coercion. Um, your consent or your partner should not hinge on any kind of fear, discomfort, pressure. For example, simply repeatedly asking your partner to do something until they say yes, that's not consent. So, in thinking about communication, it's important to be able to identify types of communication that block compassion. So, oftentimes when we analyze other, we're actually expressing our own needs or our own values. So there are several common types of communication that can be harmful or can put people on the defensive. The first being moralistic judgments. These are statements that imply wrongness or badness on the part of the other person. This could be any sort of criticism, put down. It might look like you are always late, or um, this happens because you don't care about me. Second category is a denial of responsibility. Communication becomes alienating when it clouds our responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. So, again, recognizing that onus of responsibility lies within us. Um, so, examples of denying responsibility might be like, I lied because I had to, or I drink because I'm an alcoholic. I hit my kid because he ran into the street. The third being thinking based on who deserves what. There's this concept that certain actions merit rewards, and conversely, there are certain actions that merit punishment, um, which sort of imply this innate deficiency. So, observing without evaluating. When we combine observation with an evaluation, people are likely to hear it as a criticism. So, an observation with an evaluation mixed in could look like, you seldom do what I want. In order to sort of reframe that and separate it from the evaluation, you might say something like, the last 3 times I initiated an activity, you said you didn't want to do it. Another example being, Hank Smith is a poor soccer player. When a maybe more fact-based statement might be, Hank Smith has not scored a goal in 20 games. Jim is ugly, as opposed to Jim's looks don't appeal to me. Um, oops. Something else to consider is to distinguish your feelings from your thoughts. And in doing so, avoiding following the word feel with such words as that, like, as if, pronouns or names. The distinguishing between what we feel and what we think are really important. I think a lot of people have become familiar with I feel statements. Unfortunately, they're not always carried out in the most productive way. So you might want to avoid saying things like, I feel angry when you're always late, right? Because that combines an evaluation. I feel that you are treating me unfairly. I feel like you don't care. So again, that's sort of blaming language. Um, Healthy relationships are ones that do best when we're meeting one another's needs. And so every individual is different and has different relational wants and needs. If our wants or needs do not align, one or both people may feel unfulfilled and unhappy. This can be the case, um, or it is often the case, rather, that relationships fail when there's a lack of communication or incompatibility. In the early stages of a relationship, you might be filled with so much new relationship energy that it's easy to overlook unfulfilled needs or major incompatibilities. One or both people might feel a desire to sacrifice their wants and needs to make the relationship work. So, healthy relationships happen when people in the relationship come before the relationship itself. And I'm noticing a problem with my PowerPoint, so I'm going to take this off real quick because I had some exercises I wanted to insert in between. So let's see if this works. There we go. So this is the observation or evaluation exercise. So I'm going to give you some scenarios, and I want you to shout out or use the chat box to recognize if it's an observation or an evaluation. So John was angry with me yesterday for no reason. Is this an observation or an evaluation?
We had someone in the chat say observation.
Mhm, mhm. So this would actually be an evaluation, and it's kind of hitched on at the end here. So this part here, for no reason. So you're recognizing the fact, which John might have been angry, but you're ascribing an evaluation to it, that he did not have a reason to be angry. Second one is, yesterday evening, Nancy bit her fingernails while watching TV. Is this an observation or an evaluation? Any guesses?
Observation is what someone said in the chat.
Mhm. Yeah, it's an observation. It's something that factually happened. Sam didn't ask for my opinion during the meeting. So this would be another observation. Um, Kind of looking through some of these, does anybody have any questions about maybe how to distinguish between them? So my father is a good man. That would be an evaluation. Janice works too much. That's another evaluation. Um, Henry's aggressive. Another evaluation. Pam was first in line every day this week. That's an observation. Um, my son often doesn't brush his teeth. This one's trickier. Um, any guesses? This would also be an evaluation, and the key word here being often. So a way to maybe change that statement into one that was an observation could be, my son brushed his teeth only twice this week. So
I have a quick question, Jenna.
yeah.
On that last one, I was hoping you could distinguish between Henry is aggressive and why that is an evaluation versus John was angry with me yesterday for no reason. I know you said that the last part of that one's the evaluation, but that John was angry might be an observation. So I'm curious about the difference between that and Henry is aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in this case, of the Henry is aggressive, it's classifying his behavior. So aggression might be perceived differently by different people. For some people, for example, culturally, talking loudly could be a sign of aggression, while for others, it's pretty normative for people to be excited when they speak or to talk over someone if they're having a debate. So a way to maybe transform that into a more observative statement would be to identify how it makes you feel. So when Henry raises his voice, it makes me feel uneasy, or um, X, Y, and Z behavior um, is something that I often perceive as aggression.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a helpful to distinguish in relationships too, because that kind of has to do with boundaries, right? So, for example, if you're someone who feels uncomfortable by certain gestures or like raising your voice, for example, that's helpful to communicate with your partner so that they don't inadvertently overstep a boundary. Yeah, great question. Um, so then we talked about distinguishing feelings from thoughts. And I have some more exercises here. So I feel you don't love me. Is that a feeling or a thought? And if helpful, I can go back to the previous slide. So distinguishing between what we feel and what we think. So an example would be, let me see, I have some in my notes. I feel inadequate as a guitar player would be a thought, whereas I feel disappointed in myself as a guitar player would be a feeling. So maybe thoughts that put people on the defensive could include, I feel that you should have known better. I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm constantly on call. Um, I feel my boss is being manipulative. That's really more of a thought than a feeling. So kind of returning to some of these, I'm sad that you're leaving. It's a feeling. I feel scared when you say that. That's a feeling. When you don't greet me, I feel neglected. Also a feeling. Jumping ahead to you're disgusting. Well, that's a thought. I feel like hitting you. That would be another thought. Any questions about any of these? Okay. So signs of abuse. This is important to recognize in intimate partner relationships, in familial relationships. Basically violating, ignoring, diminishing, insulting with a person's stated boundaries as a form of abuse. ignoring a no or refusing to ask permission, knowingly causing harm to another, doing acts to another person without consent. This can extend to sex, hitting, restraining, um, taking or damaging one's personal belongings, gaslighting or coercion, any type of manipulation that makes another person feel unqualified, like they're too emotional, that they're not good enough, that they don't deserve to have their wants and needs respected. Making threats, diminishing choice and autonomy of the other person, or using power, control, or fear in any way to coerce another to agree to certain actions. Can anyone think of any other actions that might constitute abuse?
I think something I've heard this year is thinking about like requiring someone to give you their social media passwords, or some things like with COVID, like not letting you leave the house or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So sort of like either invasions of privacy or security, like you said, with passwords, or something maybe in the guise of protection that's actually a controlling behavior, like not allowing someone to leave the house. Yeah, so resources to be aware of for leaving an abusive relationship. Often the first step is to get support, to reach out to people who care about you, whether it's family, friends, instructors, people in the community. We have resources through CAPS. There's also an organization in Pullman called Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse. They have a lot of great resources for um, interpersonal violence and people who've survived it. After getting support, the next step would be to create a safety plan. And there are a couple of links here where you can look up specific safety plans, but these are just ways in which you can plan a way to exit the relationship in the safest way possible. We have several hotlines listed here, as well as an website that has a chat feature, if that's something that someone feels more comfortable using as well. CAPS. So keep in mind that CAPS is open throughout spring and summer semesters, providing telehealth services. So we have walk-in crisis services. We have an after-hours crisis hotline that you can reach by calling that main number here. We are offering individual therapy, group therapy, and assessment. Some of the workshops we have running right now included survivors for interpersonal violence. We have a trans support group. We have several undergraduate and graduate student process groups. There's a new CBT for anxiety, which is a skills-based workshop that's being offered starting next Thursday. So if any of these are things that you're interested in, you can always call the front office staff and they can get you partnered with a group or to come in for an intake. I say come in, but really that's like a Zoom meeting.
Jenna, we had a comment in the chat
Mhm.
for the what other actions could be abuse. The student says something that came to mind was taking advantage of someone financially. Would this be considered an example of abuse?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It most definitely can be. And unfortunately, that's something we see a lot in elder care. So people who use someone's vulnerable situation in order to steal money from them, in order to get them to agree to things that they maybe not have clear understanding that they're agreeing to. So yeah, I can think of a lot of different situations in which manipulating someone or coercing them or stealing from them can be a form of abuse as well. So that's what I have in my PowerPoint. Let me stop the screen share. What questions or comments do folks have? If you think of anything after we end the meeting, don't hesitate to reach out either by calling CAPS front desk or sending me a message in your patient portal. I am happy to chat more or to partner you with resources that might be helpful. So unless there are any further questions, we can end it here.
Someone in the chat says, are there any tips or tricks for recognizing a thought versus a feeling?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one tip or trick would be to sort of I don't know if you've ever seen like a feeling wheel that identifies like primary emotions. So like happy, sad, afraid. Um, Sometimes it helps to identify emotions that way, as opposed to any kind of evaluation attached to it is more likely to be a thought. So like that example I used of the guitar playing, I feel like an inadequate guitar player, as opposed to I feel sad or disappointed in myself for not have progressing as far as I anticipated. Is that helpful? Great.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, looks like everyone hopped off the call.